Welcome to Consulting from the Couch, where we explore people, ideas, and leaderships shaping our communities and our lives one story at a time. In today's episode, I'm going to talk with Josh McGhee. Josh is the Senior Director of Member Engagement and Communications with Touchstone Energy. I'll let Josh tell you a little bit more about Touchstone in a minute, but I just wanted to say on a personal note that I've had the pleasure to work with Josh for several years. First, when I was a committee chairman for a Touchstone Energy committee a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. But then most recently, Josh has started providing some on-site training for some leadership groups that I oversaw. And I really got to know Josh well during that time. And again, when I was putting together the podcast to talk about leaders in various businesses and various industries, Josh came to mind. So Josh, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Steve, for having me. I appreciate it. One of my favorite things to do in supporting our Touchstone Energy members is to support them throughout the country, even including traveling, like you just mentioned. I've always enjoyed being able to partner with you and support some of the initiatives that you've had going on. And the whole point is to build engagement across electric utility employees so that we can all engage the nearly 42 million Americans that electric cooperatives serve. And so I take my role pretty seriously, which is to bring the cooperative business model to life, because that is what makes electric cooperatives different. Electricity is just an excuse to make life better in those areas. So that's what we focus on, Steve, Touchstone Energy programs, resources to help our member co-ops strengthen their relationship with the end-of-line members that are so important to them.
That's awesome. So listen, so we might have some non-co-op employees, members, staff, or whatever. Touch real quickly, if you would. You mentioned the co-op business model. I obviously know what it is, was in it for 35 years. Will you tell those listeners that might not have the privilege of being exposed to it like us, can you tell them what that is?
Absolutely. It's an alternative business model that can go into any industry. In fact, this business model is pretty industry agnostic in that you can see it across housing, education, agriculture, like us, the energy industry, retail industry. And what it is an alternative for the for-profit model. So many businesses are driven and built for that ROI at the end of the year. What's the margin at the end of the year, and what's the bottom line? Well, we care about the bottom line and margin too, but this way, we do electricity at cost, and we don't have a margin. If we do, we give it back to the people who gave us the money in the first place, which would be our members. So, cooperatives are a global business model. You can see it in many places. Like I mentioned, schooling and agriculture and retail, it's really all around. A few examples, REI, the outdoor sports store, Ace Hardware. Some of these familiar names are cooperatives too.
That's great. So listen, you mentioned it, and we'll get to the co-op because I've got some more questions shaped around leadership and the business model. But with Touchstone serving just, a national brand, I mean, really the co-ops, and maybe I'm kind of speaking from a slanted point of view, but if the local co-ops use Touchstone Energy like they should, strategic backbone for these co-ops. From a leadership perspective, how do you balance that big picture strategy, trying to satisfy many, but also keeping that deeply local, community-driven service? How do you balance that?
It's all about value. If something's valuable at the local level with an electric cooperative, that's all that matters to me. And local impact is so important. It doesn't matter what business that you're in. And so if our business model allows our members to be in the middle of our decision making, they essentially are our owners. So any business will want to bring value to their owners first, because if you can't do that, you can't bring value to anybody. And so our members are in the middle of our decision making. When companies put their customer, their client, whoever they're serving in the middle of their decision making, you are naturally going to start being a leader in the field that you're in. Walt Disney taught the world this. He put his guest, he didn't call them customers, he put his guest in the middle of everything that he did. His guest experience, I often say he was healthily obsessed with it. Yeah. He went to the absolute last mile And because of that, he became a leader in the entertainment and amusement and magic space because he put his who mattered in the middle of his decision making. So, Steve, as long as we do that at the national level, at the local level, we'll continue to be valuable to these communities.
And I think, Josh, we're very fortunate to have worked in the co-op world because co-op model, it naturally aligns with the values of servant leadership. Just talk a little bit how you personally approach servant leadership in that manner, obviously what that means to the co-ops and the members.
Sure, I'm happy to, Steve, and I can sort of take my hard utility hat off and put on several hats that I wear around the town and the community that I live in here outside the D.C. area. Servant leadership has always been important, but it's more important now than ever because it's starting to become quite rare. Leaders can have agendas that put them in leadership positions. Mine is to serve others. It's to anticipate their needs, bring value to their life. Sometimes it's in the form of wisdom or guidance. During the day, it's giving programs and resources to my clients, which would be electric cooperatives under the Touchstone Energy brand. Servant leadership can be defined by putting the other person in an elevated position above yourself. And, many people mention the golden rule, I should say, which is treat others how you would like to be treated. I'd like to take it another step, is treat them the way that only they could be treated, meaning that they're individualized. They're important to you. You have invested in them so that the way that you serve that person is going to be different than you serve someone else. That's the highest form of respect. Understanding what their preferences, what their values are, and aligning with those so that when I go to serve that person, to speak into their life in any way, I'm doing it in a way that's unique. And a servant leader has to have that sort of mindset that I see this person who's in front of me. I see and hear what they tell me. I also see and hear what they might not tell me, which is understanding the context that they're in. What challenges are they upcoming against? What are their strengths that we can leverage? When you know the intangible and also what's exactly in front of you, you can really serve them in a way that sets you apart.
You touched on a lot during the first couple of minutes here, and you wear many hats. With Touchstone Energy. One thing that you do enjoy, and you mentioned it in the very beginning, was being able to go out and visit co-op, come to see me and my group. Can you share a time when listening deeply to a co-op's need or challenges directly shaped a strategic decision or innovation at Touchstone? You've been to a co-op, you listened, maybe you got a phone call, maybe you got an email, maybe at a conference, but something that occurred that really shaped when you went back and you guys made decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of challenges and opportunities that are coming into the energy space. The first is just the whirlwind of technological advances that you have to be aware of and invest in and apply. That's one thing. The other is how energy has really been brought to the forefront of policy and regulation at the highest levels of our country. At the same time, cost, supply and demand, all of it's sort of coming together to make the energy industry a unique time. And we're excited about it, frankly. I mean, there's a lot of challenges. It can be tempting for an electric co-op to try to be like another type of utility, to try to be like the big power company up the interstate, or to try to be like perhaps how a larger co-op would act. But to answer your question more specifically, Steve, when we have a challenge leaning into servant leadership, which would be our cooperative business model, is how we overcome. It's not being like the big powerhouse up the street. It's being the best version of ourselves. And so there's been times where there's been struggles in co-ops, and man, we're having trouble doing this. We'll often say, well, let's go back to the co-op principles and let's see what qualities we can build on so that we can get through this particular challenge.
Back to basics, right? How about that? Back to basics.
That's right.
How about that? You mentioned technology, Okay. Technology obviously is everywhere, and technology is great. It can also sometimes maybe make things less personalized, maybe more sterile. Maybe that's a good term. But you guys have introduced a ton of tools like Shine, which is a website builder for for the co-ops to use to share with their members or internally. You guys do national campaigns, a ton of things. Co-op Connections is a great community engagement tool that you guys have used. How do you guys focus, keep that people first approach, when developing things like that?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that question. I've often thought of a term. It's called mass personalization. How can those two words be put together?
Yeah.
Where you're supposed to communicate to the masses in a personalized way. There are many technology options that can help you reach both of those targets, where you are able to communicate to many, but you're doing it in a tailored and individualized way. I personally think Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, has really understood how to do this. In fact, he's probably listening right now. In fact, there's probably an Amazon pack that's on its way, and we'll get dinged here in just a little bit.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is Amazon has almost become more of a retail associate for you. It's an assistant. It's your search engine. It's your ability to get things quickly. And the items that you saw when you opened the app or the browser was probably suggested items for you anyway. So think about the global supply chain network Jeff Bezos has to understand. That's the mass part. Okay. But then he also does an excellent job on the personalized part where the experience is tailored to you. That's the approach that we have to take as well. How do we make individualized needs just as important as how many people we reach as well? So one of the things we do at the shop is get feedback. I mean, if you don't know the answer to a question of how to serve someone, you got to ask them. And so we have a really dedicated group of people, over 100 folks who serve on advisory committees and help us support things regionally. Our governing board of directors, Steve, you helped chair one of those groups for quite a few years, and we appreciate all the selfless work you did there. We've got to ask those people, what is important to you? And then you go back to the drawing board and you build your national resources around what's important.
Back to the basics, man. Just ask. Sometimes we have a tendency to overcomplicate things, but sometimes it's simple, right? Very simple.
It is simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the word I would choose, Steve, is the word simple.
Yeah, simple.
And I believe that we're moving into a period in business and technology where both have to be simple to break through the noise. Your value prop has to be simple. You've got to go back to the basics of being able to share why you're valuable and why you're the preferred provider very quickly. Convoluted structures are actually sort of suspect.
Yeah.
But a simple business model is refreshing.
Yeah. I mean, you're competing every day trying to get your messaging across. Not only, you're not competing with other utilities or whatever, in this case, you're competing with, like you said, Amazon, you're competing with, with Apple, Amazon, I mean, fill in the blank. And people's time they value it. And so you have to simple, concise, and
precise.
Yeah, precise. And just, I mean, you have to be to the point. So, yeah. And you guys over the years, you have done a great job with that. When I was, working at the co-op, guys were Johnny on the spot. I mean, just the creative stuff you provided, but the programs, the community programs that you provided, as well as when there were problems or opportunities, however you want to say it, you guys were always really receptive and really responsive to listening to the members. So kudos to you and Jana and everyone else at Touchstone. So let's talk about Touchstone and the culture. It's rooted, obviously. Anybody that knows anything about Touchstone knows the 4 core values: integrity, accountability, innovation, and commitment to community. If you didn't know that now, listeners, you do. As a leader, how do you reinforce these values across the wide, varied network?
One of the first and important ones is integrity that you mentioned. If you don't have integrity, it's going to be hard to move into other principles. Because even upholding those other principles, you're going to have a high integrity for it. What's kind of interesting is you can't really have high integrity unless you have a way to measure that, and that's called accountability. And so if we hold ourselves accountable to certain standards that are cultural standards, team norms, We even call everything at Touchstone Energy towards our North Star. That's going to be our highest mission statement of strengthening relationships between members and their co-ops. All of that has to be very in the forefront of our minds. And so we really push integrity of operating in a way that's transparent with one another, operating in a way that's transparent with our membership. We're a not-for-profit structure. We're a cooperative ourselves and owned by our members. And so we have to do the highest standard by them at all times. And so I would say that integrity really has to begin that conversation, Steve.
That's great. That's great. So mentioned earlier about traveling and, something that you may have learned, from a co-op that helped you make a decision. In your travels or your interaction with local co-ops, a lot of them are rural-based. The co-op that I work for, Jones Onslow, was a little slightly different, a larger membership. We actually had a town that had a Starbucks. How about that? Or had whatever, had 3 or 4 Starbucks. But a lot of the co-ops are small, rural. They're the major employer. Traveling and interacting, is there something that you may have learned, a leadership lesson potentially learned from coming directly in contact with one of these co-ops? It doesn't have to be one of the small rural ones, but something that might have surprised you.
Sure. Well, I think I have learned along the way never to underestimate a town or a community by its size, because I have been able to drive hundreds of miles in one direction just to get to where I'm going, and that's after flying there.
Yeah. We talked about that. We talked about that with Texas not long ago.
Yeah, that's right. And so I consider myself very privileged to be able to travel across America and often go to places that are way off maybe the main drag. But what I've learned is don't ever underestimate that. Every single place I've gone to has something special. They have a heartbeat. Some might have a smaller one, might have less heartbeats, but they all have one. And there's something unique about that heartbeat. On a more practical level, if you go to a town and they say, well, there's nothing special about here, we just only have the largest peanut east of the Mississippi, you'll be like, oh, well, what do you do with that? Oh, well, every year we have a peanut festival. Well, that's nothing to, put your nose up at. That's actually awesome. And if you embrace those things, every community can be unique, and they are. So for the listeners that are taking the time to listen to Steve and me today, I would encourage you, just think about what makes you unique. Because there are companies out there like Coca-Cola, Goldman Sachs, Oracle. These are national firms. They would love to know what the heartbeat of your community is. If you know what that is, if you know where people are on Friday nights at the ball field, if you know what people are doing on Saturday mornings or when the summer fair is, that's information that's very valuable. Embrace that. Don't ever underestimate the value that you know things about your community. If you're in the business world, you'll be able to serve your community better.
That's all. Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more, man. We co-ops sometimes have this advantage. A lot of times they don't realize it, and the big boys would kill to be able to know their members or their customers the way that co-ops do. Let's talk about long-term leadership success. What does that look like for you, man? Not just necessarily for Touchstone Energy, but for the whole broader co-op business model, co-op ecosystem.
Steve, to me, a leader has to respond well to events that happen around them. One of the differentiators to me between a leader and a follower is that one reacts to everything, the other one responds. The difference between a reaction is that you're only as good as you were in that moment. But a response allows you to choose how good of a response this is going to be. Does this response that I might give to a situation around me, an email or phone call or 4-year-old pulling on your pant leg, is this going to be a positive response for them, and will it create a positive event for them? The difference between a reaction and a response is just really one simple thing. You've given yourself the time and space to move out of just reacting into responding. It could sound as simple as this. Hey, that's a great question, and I'd like just a few moments to think about it before I respond. See, that right there prevents just a reaction. When you respond to things as a leader, you are creating events for others that they then respond to. And having a very high self-awareness of what that ripple effect is to others gives you the ability to maximize your influence. Reacting to everything doesn't maximize your influence. Sometimes it'll ruin it. But responding well will help you. Abraham Lincoln taught the world this, Steve. He would often write a letter. He'd read it. He'd ball it up. He'd write a second one. It was often the second one that he would send. Number one, the second one wasn't balled up. Number two, it gave him the opportunity to respond well.
That's great. At one point in time in discussions with you, in your what little free time you do have, you were involved at one point in time in church and with a church and with, was it youth leadership that you were involved in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, I want to morph that because your experience of that. There's a good chance there's a lot of people getting old like me in the co-op world, and they're retiring and going on to do other things. You potentially have the opportunity to be a mentor to someone. And I know obviously that was what the lead up about the youth pastor portion of that was. But if you did have the chance to mentor a rising leader in the co-op world, what's one principle of servant leadership that you would encourage them to develop early?
I would encourage them to always learn, always be learning. When a leader thinks that they have every answer and that they have to give every answer, you really become weak over time. But if you constantly learn and gather information from those around you, you'll become stronger. You know, there's a Bible verse, Steve, that says even a fool is considered wise if he remains silent. Yeah. Leaders have to, leaders, I should say, have to spend time in silence to listen and to process. That is another differentiator as well. So, you know, we've heard it said, I'm certainly not the first person to say that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. Just surround yourself with smart people. I agree with that, but you could do that and still not listen. So I think there's got to be a measure of humility as a leader that you've been given a position of authority and influence, and trying to operate in that place without the feedback of others is pretty dangerous and actually sets you up at risk, because there might be blind spots or corners or speed bumps along the way that you might not have been aware of unless you work together as a team. So I would apply humility to listen, humility to be the last to speak sometimes and not the first, and have fun too, because nobody wants to work for somebody who's not having fun with it. So
100% agree. 100% agree with that. Last question on this, and then we're going to shift gears. What continues to drive you in this work? Is it the innovation, the leadership, opportunities, community impact? You are an extremely talented guy, man, and just so personable. Anybody that comes in contact with you knows that you're employed by Touchstone Energy. It's not a job for you. You work with Touchstone Energy, and you bought in. So what continues to drive you to work like this with Touchstone Energy?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Steve. I feel very fortunate that I am able to have a vocation and a professional role that is mission focused, and I don't have to decide if I want to be missional and help support the world in my community or have a job. I don't have to make that that delineation. I get to be able to do that at the same time. I believe that our electric cooperative employees, they don't have to make that decision if they want to be supporting their community or make a living. That's a 2-for-1 bundle there. And so I encourage people to find what you love to do and find where you're strong in. See what makes you not feel like you're working? When do you feel fullest and fully alive? When do you have your A+ game? Tag what those moments are and try to find where you can be valuable to somebody in those things. Because in order to be passionate, you've got to have a deep well. And many times we have to do things, and it doesn't necessarily reflect having a deep well. But when you find what that is, you're able to pull from that a lot. And I'll tell you what mine is. It's to make life better for people, to lift them up. There's a principle that I have a lifter of my head, and I want to help other people to be lifted up as well. There's enough to bring us down. What's a way that you could bring peace or a moment of happiness to somebody, or really a stronger word is joy? And during the day, my job allows me to use electricity to do that. Electricity powers and empowers people's lives to do important things. And when I'm not wearing that hard hat figuratively, then I'm wanting to still do that on the side. I want to lift people up. I want to help empower them to do things that they never thought that they could do. And I'm really only doing what people have shown to me. I love because I was first loved. And I want to carry that to others as well.
That's awesome, man. What a great way to go through the first part of the questions that I shared with you. And I mean, that's just amazing stuff. So now I'm going to ask you some questions. You have no idea what I'm going to ask you. And I'm going to.
All right, I'm ready.
Yeah. And I'm going to just be some questions I'm just asking all my podcast guests these questions, just trying to get a little feedback about even more who they are. So when you think of the word successful, who's the first person who comes to mind and why?
Who's the first person that comes to mind? I have to think of my parents, because they paved the way for me to understand what success looked like. And I'm not referring to the tangible or the material side of things. I come from a family, fortunately, that has always been of service. My dad has owned an auto repair shop for 45 years in Waldorf, Maryland. And Steve, he's fixed many cars without ever gathering a dime because of it.
I'm sure. I am sure.
Yeah. And, there's been recessions along the way. You think of the 08 and the 09, you think of inflation, and then the pressures that COVID put on. There used to be about 300 auto repair shops in the small town of Waldorf, Maryland. And through all of those pressures, only about 120 remained. And my dad was one of them, because you have to have more than just good books. You got to have good heart as well. So
that's awesome.
I'd say my parents fit the bill.
All right. What is your favorite documentary or movie?
Well, I love the American Revolution. And there's a series that AMC put out a few years ago. It's now on Amazon Prime, Jeff, in case you're listening.
Yeah.
And it's called Turn.
I love it. I love it. Great. It's a great series.
Oh, yeah. I love Turn. It's based off of the book Washington Spies, and it's filmed all around our area in Virginia. I love Williamsburg, and so I've watched Turn more times, and my wife is so sick of it. But it's a winter thing for me to help get through some of those long evenings in the winter.
Is it? So it's now on Prime. How many seasons total?
Yeah, there's four seasons, right? And AMC, made it a TV series, and I think Prime has the first 3 right now, and then AMC, has a plus or something like that.
Yeah,
and you can subscribe to all of them. But don't ask me how I know that.
That's good. I've enjoyed that too. Morning rituals. What do the first 60 minutes of each morning look like for you, Josh?
Well, it used to be waking up on my own, but having a 4-year-old, I have a 4-foot alarm that jumps on me every morning. And so I enjoy that. And I'm being jumped on a little more than usual because my wife is approaching almost the finish line of being pregnant with our second. And so, she has to be a little more comfortable here. And so I take the pain and the grunts of the 4-year-old, and he's just really sweet. The first thing we love to do is to come downstairs and make coffee as soon as possible, if not sooner. And my little buddy will get Teddy Grahams, and he loves to dip his little Teddy Graham in our coffee.
Oh, wow.
And
nice.
we have a front sitting room here in our house, and two chairs, and there's no technology in this room. There's a piano. And we read our Bible, we read our devotional, we try to catch up before the world gets going, if we're able to beat it. And then you're off to the races. But it's always good to have some quiet time. Quiet time is a very rare thing. And many people say they want to live in the present more. Well, then you got to pause enough to enjoy the present. And creating quiet time, as we call it, helps you do that.
That's, man, great. That is awesome. What topic would you speak about if you were asked to give a TED Talk, but it had to be on something outside of your main area of expertise? What topic?
Phew.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, you're throwing some incredible questions this way.
Yeah.
Boy, even the fool's considered wise if you remain silent. Sorry, Steve, I'm like...
That's all right. That's all right. Let's go. You think about that one. Let's go to the next. What do you believe is true, even though you can't prove it?
Well, being upright is sometimes more difficult in life, and you don't always immediately see the results of being an honest, upright, above reproach person. And sometimes if someone asks me, well, why do you do that? Do you see the benefit of being honest? Well, not all the time. You don't see it immediately. But I believe that it's true. And that time will tell you that being honest and transparent and loving is the right way for the long haul. You might not move as fast as some of these other, folks, but you're going to go the distance.
That's great. Josh, listen, man, amazing. You're a superstar in the co-op world. Man, this has been great. I appreciate you giving me the time today. You provided just a really insightful look into how servant leadership is. And it's not just a philosophy. It's something that's practical. There's a daily commitment to it. And with Touchstone Energy, you guys truly believe that. I want to provide for the listeners one thing. In addition to the servant leadership stuff that Josh talked about, the cooperative business model, and in this instance, as it relates to electric utilities, it's just not about electricity. It's about people. And that goes for other forms of co-ops, like Josh talked about, whether it's grocery store co-ops or insurance co-ops or whatever. But that the common thread is that it's not about the product or service that they're selling. It's about people. So Josh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate your leadership, what you do in our world as well. There's few people that I consider as valuable to our community as you. So thank you, Steve. I really appreciate you having me on. And it was great seeing you last week as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And for those that are listening to us, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Consulting from the Couch. You be sure to follow us or check out the other episodes. You can go to BLC Consulting LLC. There's an LLC on the end of that. BLCconsultingllc.com. Until next time, I'm Steve Goodson. Talk soon.